Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Memphis Mayor Paul Young, tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us. I am joined tonight by Paul Young, Mayor of Memphis. Thanks for being here again.
Thank you for having me as always.
Along with Bill Dries, reporter with the Daily Memphian. Obviously, we're going to talk a ton about the Memphis, the federal surge of resources and try to break it down and answer some questions and so on. We're taping Thursday morning, I should say. That's important because, sort of every day feels like a new day. So that's when we're taping here. As of, I think it was yesterday, there's something like 1,500 federal personnel here. There have been hundreds of arrests. We'll talk more about the various elements because it's not one surge of federal resources. There's many parts to this that we'll try to break down. But one of the things that I think we get a lot of questions about, we are asking a lot of people like you and other of the many agencies involved in this is, do you have a list, or not that you're supposed to bring it here, but of everyone who's been arrested or detained, and how many people is that, and for what were they arrested and detained? Yeah. And by whom of all the agencies were they arrested and detained? That seems like a very murky question that people want answers to.
Yeah, it's definitely a question that we've been trying to work through ourselves. My understanding from our police department is that there is some data that exists from the arrest records that are held within Shelby County government. And so we're working to try and get access to all of that information. And we certainly want to be able to understand exactly the who and what's happening on that front. But our goal is to make sure that as this task force is working, that we are trying to direct them towards the things that will boost the work that we've already been doing. We have fugitive task forces, we have organized crime unit, we have multi-agency gang unit, we have homicides that have been unsolved, and there are resources within this task force that can help us. And so we want to make sure that we are clearing the warrants that we have. We have at least 30 homicide suspects that we know of. And we want to make sure that as this task force is here, that we're using it to go out there and get the drivers of violent crime in our city.
And for as long as I've been doing the show, I think there have been partnerships like that with the city, and that generally is around the marshals, or ATF, FBI, DEA, Bureau of Tobacco and Firearms, never necessarily all at once at this scale. Right. But those things are pretty typical. The one that I think there's a lot of questions about, and there are questions about nationally, and I guess Chicago is sort of really the hotbed of this right now, is what is ICE doing?
Yeah.
And we did a story, Jody Callan wrote a story for us in the last few days. There was a lot of sort of advocacy groups, and it was very secondhand and thirdhand. I'm not saying it's not true. That's the one that seems like it's really hard to get our arms around and everyone's arms around. And as Charlie Caswell, the county commissioner for Fraser and Nutbush, said last week on the show, he represents Nutbush, and he said he's very supportive of a lot of what's going on with, as you just said, those kinds of efforts. But he also said, people in Nutbush, where there's a big Hispanic community, are very scared.
Yeah.
And what do you know about ICE? That's a big buildup, but what do you know about ICE?
Well, I don't know much, and I think it's similar to how it was prior to the surge. I mean, ICE was active here and in other communities across the country, and we don't have a lot of insight on that. But I can tell you what we were told as this was beginning is that this surge is going to be about violent crime, and if there are individuals that have issues with documentation and status that are a part of any efforts around violent crime, then certainly they would be turned over to ICE. That's how it was framed. And so our goal is to put as much emphasis on the violent crime side and get all of the teams that are here, ICE included, focused on helping us on violent crime.
And one more before I go to Bill. And again, ICE, you said you're trying to find out, but the groups like U.S. Marshals, the other federal law enforcement agencies that have worked here before, is there good communication with them? Between you, your office, MPD?
There's definitely good communication. We have a person from Memphis Police Department who's located at the Joint Operations Center, so they're talking to them on a daily basis and getting updates. And we're now beginning to fold them into some of the operations and some of the investigations that have been underway. And so those are the things that I think are really going to reap dividends for our community.
Bill.
As we record this, or earlier this week, County Mayor Lee Harris held a press conference and talked about some anecdotal information. Much of what I think we're all dealing with is anecdotal. There are some numbers, but his concern is that people are being profiled for traffic stops, and even to the point of where their ID is being kept. Have you heard those things? Are there concerns about that?
Well, I've definitely heard from the community that there's concern about how immigration enforcement is happening in our community. That's certainly one of the things that is of top concern to us as well. And so that is why our focus is to get the task force laser focused on violent crime in our city, because the more we focus on violent crime, the less issues we're going to have with the fears in the immigrant community around immigration enforcement.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on how this is playing out? Some neighborhoods in the city have helicopters overhead all the time. Other parts of the city really don't even know, just from what happens around their homes, that this is even happening in town.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mixed bag. We're what, 2 weeks into this surge, and it's been a lot of focus on traffic enforcement. We want to drive the effort towards, again, I keep saying the same thing, but I want you to really feel where our position is. We have some individuals that have committed heinous crimes in our community. Just a couple of weeks ago at my parents' church, we had a session where we had about 500 individuals that were there to speak with Chief Davis about where their cases were, because they have lost loved ones to violence in our city. And so there's a lot of trauma that's happening in our communities. And so as we think about how we're driving this thing, I want to make sure that we are getting less victims in our city. I want less families being victimized and having to sit in those types of situations, because nationwide we have about a 50% clearance rate when it comes to homicides. That means half of the people who have lost their family member don't know who did it. And we now have all of these federal agencies that are here that can help us solve those crimes, because they have different levels of investigative abilities. And so my goal is to make sure that we're pushing all of these resources towards addressing the things that have really been tearing our community apart.
Mm-hmm. You were present when Governor Lee was here earlier this week, mm-hmm. and he talked about an open-ended type of involvement here for the state as well as the federal mm-hmm. resources. Your thoughts on that? Should this be drawn out, or should this be an intense few weeks or months?
I think the surge is going to be an intense few weeks, but to Governor Lee's point, there should definitely be a continued partnership with regards to the federal agencies that are here supporting law enforcement. Those agencies like the FBI, DEA, ATF, U.S. Marshals, we can use their help to help us solve crimes, just like I talked about a few moments ago. The TBI, all of these agencies, they've been partners with MPD in the past, but I think the hope is that we have an increased partnership as a result of the work that's happening now.
All right. Is there a tension, or is it part of a transition, so to speak, between the rhetoric we heard from Stephen Miller, the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, and Pam Bondi, the U.S. Attorney General, what they said here, and then what Governor Lee said earlier this week? Are there mixed messages?
I couldn't say if it's a mixed message or not. I can only tell you what my goals are for Memphis and where we want to drive this thing. We want to apply the resources that are here to solve the challenges that we have. And that has really been my focus in trying to really tune out all of the noise and rhetoric, because there's positions on all sides of this argument. There are people that love it, people that hate it. My goal is to make sure that as we're in it, that we get something out of it that benefits the residents of this city.
Right. And do Memphis Police Department policies change after this is over as a result of how effective this is, or?
No, I mean, the policies and procedures of the Memphis Police Department are what they are. We're always looking at continuous improvement and strategies for that, but not just as a basis of this event taking place now.
Let me pick up we talked about ICE. We talked about the kind of alphabet soup of the federal law enforcement. Bill just mentioned the MPD isn't doing a whole lot differently right now, is what I'm hearing you saying as part of this surge, other than they've got a whole lot of other people around they're coordinating with. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, again, the policies and procedures of the police department have not changed, but certainly with the presence of many of these individuals, there are officers that are on teams with some of the groups. They're working on executing warrants. They're working on doing investigations. So their work has changed and been amplified with the support of these agencies, yes.
Let's talk about Tennessee Highway Patrol. They had already seemed, I mean, anecdotally, and I think we could, I mean, you just see it on the highways, they'd really increased their presence on the highways. It feels like in the spring through the summer, you could sort of, this is purely my experience, you could feel the highways getting slower. They are really slow now. I mean, you can feel that.
Right.
Do you expect, and you've spent, a fair amount of time with, quite a bit of time with Governor Lee and I'm sure his staff, will that continue past the surge? Because it's been promised for many years there would be this big increase of Tennessee Highway Patrol, patrolling the Tennessee highways around Memphis that hadn't really materialized until the last 6 months. Does that continue? Does that change? Does that expand?
Yeah, even prior to this surge, Tennessee Highway Patrol had dramatically increased their presence, which we welcomed because we need them on our interstates. I think they had roughly 50 to 60 people here prior to the surge. Right now, I think they have roughly 100 plus, 110 or so individuals that are here. I'm not quite sure what number will remain after this surge, but I expect it to be somewhere between 60 to 100.
Let's stay with roads for a second. I mean, that's been for many people a real, people talk, I'm sure to you, and not just drag racing, which is a problem, but also, and the 2 MPD officers, pulled over for that this week, which was obviously not a good look, not a good thing. But just the general population, the roads were getting really fast. It happened nationally. It was kind of a COVID thing. It does feel like people have slowed down. And one thing Wanda Halbert, the county clerk, talked about is a big jump in the number of people going to get their temporary tags replaced with actual tags. Is there more of that your office would like to see happen? I mean, we have had Chief Davis on before and talked about, this, how many temporary tags are out there. There's a sort of a feeling, people will say, of lawlessness associated with that. Is that something that can come out of this and be
I definitely
changed?
think post-COVID, the roads and highways have felt a bit more chaotic. It's why we were asking for Tennessee Highway Patrol to come in and help and support. And I do think it's a good thing for people to slow down. It's the chaos on the roads is what make people feel unsafe. And as you know, we have seen crime in our community going down in double digits over the last 2 years. But people constantly say they don't feel it. And the roads can contribute to whether you feel it, because that's what you experience each and every day. So we certainly want to see more peace and calm on our highways and roads.
I think this morning we had Aaron Fleming on our staff had a story about Tennessee Highway Patrol does chase, and that has been sometimes a controversial and or supported decision by MPD doesn't chase unless it has to be a very high bar, not just somebody speeding where they're going to chase.
Right.
The reason being the risk of wrecks and damage to other people. There have been a few wrecks since then. So how do you react to that? That there have been wrecks from Tennessee Highway Patrol, be the person pursued, running into a school building in one place, but they were being chased. I mean, other people will say, well, yeah, but we want these people who are doing bad things to know they're not allowed to do that.
Well, I think the policies that we have in place with the Memphis Police Department are intended to try to protect people in our community. And so I don't envision our policies necessarily changing. If there's someone who has done a very violent crime in our community, then our officers do have the discretion to go out and chase that individual as necessary, and I think that's the way that we should establish it on a case-by-case basis.
One more of the many different groups, and I'll go back to Bill. And it's funny because this has been the headline nationally. It was the headline probably here was the National Guard. Mm-hmm. And yet in some ways it feels like that's the least, I don't want to say important, I don't want to dismiss the Guard, obviously as individuals and as an organization, but that's sort of the least impact so far.
Right.
What is the Guard doing now? What will the Guard do? Because Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, said, a week ago, that the Guard could be here for as much as a year.
Yeah. I think the order, from my understanding of the order, is that they could be here up to a year and up to 1,000 individuals. And I think that we'll see roughly 150 or so present at any given time here. We have had direct communication with the Tennessee National Guard Major General, and he has been really accommodating with regards to how they show up. They have sidearms and not the large guns. They are doing pedestrian patrols primarily in the downtown area. They will support events, things like Grizzlies games or football games, and help direct traffic, relieving some of the pressure on our officers so that they can go out and do more law enforcement activities. And so they have been thus far pretty good partners to us, and we want to keep the conversation going so that there's good dialogue around what their daily assignments are going to be.
So again, but you don't see them going on drug interdiction or traffic enforcement, pulling people over, some of the things I think people really fear.
No, I don't envision that.
Okay. Bill.
And Mayor, you talked about this perception. The crime statistics are out there. There are numerous dashboards that deal with this at different levels, but yet people have been skeptical about it. And I wonder if that's the value of the Guard and their physical presence in downtown in areas where people might have been afraid to go.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think of the Guard similar to how I think of Blue Suede Brigade in downtown Memphis, the men and women that wear the blue shirts, and they help to be eyes and ears for people that are patroning downtown. And the National Guard will do similar. As we were told by their team that they are directed not to directly engage, but to call law enforcement for backup if and when they see an incident taking place. And so I think that is the role that they will play, is support to the law enforcement partners.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let me change subjects here, as all-consuming as the task force has been.
Yes.
We talked about this before we went on the air, and that is that South City, the development where Foot Homes used to stand, reached an important milestone earlier this month. The 6th and final phase was completed. You cut the ribbon on that. It's something you were intimately involved in as Housing and Community Development Director. What does that moment represent for not just the end of public housing here, but affordable housing in general?
Yeah, I think the story of Foot Homes is really, really important in the Memphis story. It was the last traditional public housing development that we had in the city, and I think it's been a success. We have 720 affordable mixed income units that are available in our community right now, where there were 420 that were standing. And as you know, the story is really special for me, given that my dad grew up right there. And he was there for the first groundbreaking that we had as I was director of housing at that time. And he's no longer with us. But it's a special moment for me personally, but I think it's a special moment for our city because it's a model that I think can be replicated. Not only did we build new housing units for the families that were relocated, we had urban strategies working with each of these families to help them identify what were the barriers that were could be potentially holding them back, whether they needed more education, transportation, childcare, whatever it is. Urban Strategies was there to walk alongside those families, and I think that many of the developments that we have in our community could benefit from that type of support for families.
Right, because there were concerns at the outset of this about gentrification, about displacing those residents. There were more than 400 people living there
Right.
when the demolition began, who were moved out. There are now over 700 units there. And everybody who was displaced during the construction phase was offered the opportunity to come back. About 60 or so came back. But the others, it was a pretty long haul with several stops along the way, right?
Yeah, I think we started the relocation in 2017, and we finished the last phase just a couple of weeks ago. And so, if you're on a development timeline that's that long, of course, people will have established their lives in different locations. But 65 of them came back, and you have other families that are now going to be able to have a place that they can call their own, a quality housing unit, and they're going to make new memories in that space.
All right.
I'm going to circle back to a few more loose ends. No, I'm glad we talked about that, and we're going to try to get you on the show in the next couple months because there's all kinds of other things. The Sheraton Hotel, there's a lot, paving and potholes. We had just all kinds of things that we would also like to talk to you about. But a couple things. One is a quick question: Is this surge of federal resources costing the city of Memphis more in any way?
So there are officers that are doing overtime as a result, and we have been in conversation with the federal government around how we can get some resources to offset that. And so still more to come on that, but that's definitely something that we're going to be requesting.
But all the other agencies, that's all federal money or that's state money?
That's all federal money.
You were very public about saying, and I'm going to paraphrase you poorly, that you didn't really want this to happen. You didn't want a federal intervention, but you made the decision, my words, not yours, do the best to work with the agencies, and as you've been saying, try to focus them in directions where you've worked with federal agencies in the past, other mayors have. Are you still of that mind, and is the criticism that you should have protested, fought, filed lawsuits, done things that other mayors, other Democratic mayors in the country have done, is that fair criticism?
I think it's a fair criticism. I don't know that it's as informed as it should be. I think that people have to look at our situation differently than you look at a Chicago or Portland. In our case, we have a Republican governor and a Republican president that had made a decision that they were going to bring in the National Guard. In Chicago, there's a Democratic governor that says they don't want the National Guard. And so we operate under a different circumstance than these other communities. And my goal as mayor, this is what leadership is about. This is the time where you have to make a decision on how you're going to navigate your community through a moment like this that is very politically charged, it's emotionally charged. But my goal is to make sure that Memphis comes out strong on the back end. And I think the best decision for Memphis is to figure out how to apply these resources to address the challenges that we do have.
You are not in charge of the jail. The jail is under the sheriff's office, county funded. But do you worry that all these people being arrested are going to overstress an already jail that's beyond its capacity, in need of tremendous repairs, locks, all kinds of problems at the jail?
Yeah, it's certainly a concern. It's one of the concerns that we talked about as this was getting started, and it's even more reason for us to focus our efforts on violent crime. We want to preserve jail space for the individuals that really need to be there.
Yeah. Last one, I'll go back to Bill for a couple minutes. Is there reputational damage? I mean, should it be embarrassing for Memphis that this is happening? Should it be, or is it, I don't know, is there reputational damage?
My goal is to be the city that navigates through this and strengthens our reputation. I think that we have an opportunity to be the city. While our name is in the national media, worldwide media, we have an opportunity to be the city that overcomes it and reduces crime in our community and begin to elevate investment into our people and into our city.
Bill.
And before this all started, in kind of trying to predict how it could go, all the different ways it could go, you also talked a good deal with the mayor of Washington, D.C. And how informative was that city, that district's experience with this?
Very informative. I mean, we had great conversations with Mayor Bowser as well as her Deputy Mayor Lindsay Apaya and talked to them quite a bit about how they navigated these circumstances and how they worked with the National Guard that was in their city, and what types of assignments they had. What were some of the benefits of having the support of those federal resources to their police department. Chief Davis has a relationship with the chief in DC, and so they've been able to compare notes. And so it's always good when you have someone who has gone through something that you're getting ready to encounter, just to understand some of the things that help them navigate those waters.
Right. And I know just enough about this to be dangerous, but is St. Louis an example? Because my understanding is St. Louis may be kind of unique in that I believe they have federal resources, but not necessarily the Guard there.
I don't know much about what's happening in St. Louis relative to this, so I couldn't answer that one.
Let me ask you a quick question that we won't be able to follow up on. What else are you working on right now?
We're working on a lot of things. We are certainly working to make sure that we are aligned with regards to how we are taking care of our roads and our streets, and how we're picking up trash, paving roads. Those are things that are deeply important. And one of the things that we wanted to do as we go through this situation is make sure that we focus on enhancing the work that we're already doing, continuity of the work that we're already doing in our city, and sustaining the progress that we achieve.
Okay. We're going to get you back. We'll get you back soon and talk about some of the other things and get an update on this. We appreciate you being here. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for joining us. Missed any of the show tonight, go to WKNO.org, YouTube, or The Daily Memphian. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.